Hello, everyone. This is Nicole Johnson-Starr with the PTSD Retreat Radio Talk Show. I'm still sitting here with Kevin Lake, author of Off Switch, which we were discussing in the last segment, and we've moved on. We spent time talking about the book and talking about personal experiences. But Kevin, I would really love to talk about, in the book you talk about substance abuse, and I would love to talk about, your personal experiences with this, because my understanding is that you have a very personal perspective on alcoholism and PTSD.
Yes. I mentioned this in the book and the author's afterward. The book itself, as we've said before, is a fictitious novel based on facts. It's roughly 50,000 words long, barely meeting criteria to be a full-length novel. But there's also an 8,000-word author's afterword in the back where I explain just how much of the novel is based upon fact. And I give my own personal and very humble opinion on particularly the issue of suicide among veterans. If you follow the media, or if you follow this issue in the media, you'll know that we've now lost more veterans from the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq at the hands of suicide than we lost on the battlefield. Suicide rates in the military population surpassed that of the civilian population about 2 years ago. And everybody's screaming, why? And I really feel we're not looking at the obvious. If you Google suicide, the best minds on that matter will tell you that the number one leading cause of suicide is depression, and the number two leading cause of suicide is substance abuse, be it drugs, be it alcohol. Well, I'm not a genius, I'm far from it, but I don't think it takes a genius to see that in the case of suicidal veterans and veterans who are committing suicide, those criteria are being met because, number one, as far as the depression goes, depression is tightly wound within the ism of PTSD itself. And then number two, substance abuse. This is an area in which, in an attempt to help, I personally believe we're messing up with our veterans. There's so much dope out there being pushed through the VA, being pushed through the private sector for those seeking help in the private sector that, in my opinion and for me, is doing more damage than the PTSD itself. And that's addressed in the book, and I don't want to give any spoilers to the book, but you'll find that with the main character in the book, that is an issue that leads to demise. And Nicole, you mentioned my personal experiences with substance abuse, addiction. I mentioned in the novel during the afterword that I abused substances given to me by the Army, the pain pills, the Vicodin, given to me by the VA, the tramadol, the freaky psychedelic drugs I was on. I was on 7 prescriptions by the time I left the States and left the VA. Now, today, I'm on none of it. I know that there's going to be shrinks out there that say, oh, my God, we'll get back on those pills. Let me tell you something, people. Those pills were doing more damage to me personally than the PTSD, okay? I shared with Nicole during our break that I'm an alcoholic, aside from having PTSD and just being a total nut, as my close friends would call me. And I had almost 8 years of continuous sobriety under my belt. I sought treatment for alcoholism in the year 2002, and I found a way that worked for me. I got 7.5 years of sobriety under my belt. I thought the doors on addiction for me were shut and closed and locked and would never be revisited again. Well, I got injured in Iraq. It was a non-combat related injury. It was a duty-related injury, and this is addressed in the book. But one of the things that the book addresses that isn't addressed by Hollywood and the war stories we see is some of the things that go on during a deployment that aren't always made public in the eye of the public, and that's abuse of leadership. Well, I was injured in Iraq, and I was denied medical treatment for about 4 months, and so something that should have taken maybe 2 weeks to fix ended up costing me a 6-month stay in the Army hospital when we got back. I was in the Warrior Transition Battalion at Fort Lewis for 6 months, getting help and recovery from an injury I got in Iraq. I had surgery, and these things could have been avoided if I would have been allowed to seek treatment in Iraq. But my leadership threatened with Article 15's reduction in pay, all these punishments if I were to go to the doctor. And again, I don't blame the Army, and I don't blame the National Guard. I was a National Guardsman. I blame the leadership that exists in the military and in the private sector. It's out there. And it's taken me a few years to resolve this. I used to hate the Army. I used to hate the Guard. I don't. The Army, the National Guard, the VA, they're filled with wonderful people doing wonderful things. We just had some toxic leadership that denied me and some of my friends medical attention. Now, back to my point about addiction. When I was in the Army hospital, I was in so much pain I couldn't walk upright. I couldn't carry more than 10 pounds. I had an injury in my groin region. It was misdiagnosed originally as a hernia, but they later found out it was actually a disconnected epididymis. That's a big word. What that is it's the tube that connects to male's testicles, not female's testicles, but male's testicles. Yeah, you're welcome. that carry sperm actually became disconnected from my testicle, and this happened during a PTSD test, one of the many we were forced to take while in Iraq, while in a combat zone, performing combat mission. It was crazy, but my body just gave out. It just snapped. You know, I was 36 years old. We were exhausted. My body broke. I wasn't allowed to get treatment for it. So by the time I got to the hospital, I was in so much pain. I had an infection in my inguinal canal, from where seminal fluid was actually within my inguinal canal. My groin area was swollen. That's why they thought it was a hernia. But anyway, they gave me Vicodin. I was hesitant to take it because I was aware of my addictive tendencies, my alcoholism. But I said, you know what? I can't walk. I can't roll over in bed at night without waking up because of the pain. So I started taking it, and it worked. It took care of the pain, and it reopened a floodgate for me that, like I said, I thought had been locked and closed, and I'd never visit again. The floodgate of addiction. And again, by the time, fast forward 2 years after that, I was on 7 different medications, different pain pills. I had relapsed in my alcoholism. I had started drinking again. I spent about 2 years out there drinking again, drinking on top of these medications that I was receiving from both the Army and the Defense Administration, doing more damage in my life and to people around me in my life, my family, my friends, associates, innocent people who would cross my path.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and stop right there real fast. Folks, are you listening to this? He's not just saying that PTSD affected him and that this issue affected him. It's affecting everybody around you. So if you think that your issues are not affecting somebody, you guys know I'm military. I'm not going to pull punches here, and there's no sugarcoating. If you're doing something like this, it is affecting your loved ones. No matter what you tell yourself, be totally clear about that fact. Everything you're doing is affecting those around you because they love you and they care. So be honest with yourself and know that I normally say this earlier, Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and say it now. Folks, what is being stated in here is what worked, what did not work, first off, but then we're going to go into what does work for Kevin here. And please be aware, if there's any changes, if you're on medication, there are people that it has worked for. But if you're on medication and you want to stop that, please do not do so without letting your doctor know. Please share with them, especially if it's somebody you trust. And if you'd like to know more about alternatives, you can actually talk to us, and I can actually get you in touch with some nutritionists and some holistic doctors. And I do say doctors because these guys have trained in holistic medicine and all naturopathy. So I think I just created a word, but please please talk to them and don't do this alone. There's wonderful support. And Kevin, I know you made some drastic decisions for you that have helped you a lot. Would you say that you did it all by yourself?
Not at all. Fortunately for me, no matter how much of a maggot I became while I was back in the throes of active addiction again, I've had people in my life who care about me. I have taken drastic measures. I do live in the Philippines, outside of the country. I culture is an amazing thing. And Nicole, you and I talked about this
Yes.
Earlier. I don't want to give too much of your past away, but you actually lived in Asia yourself for many years. There are really a lot of good things about American society. I love America. We call it politically correct in America. We're sensitive towards others, and that's good in so many ways. But one of the problems is that we're very stigmatic, and everything has to have its place. And I was struggling with trying not to be put in that box labeled crazy war vet. So I was dealing with trying to get back into American society, live the life I wanted to live, and stay out of that box and all the other boxes. We've talked about my writing. I've written 4 books. I'm writing 10 to 12 hours a day now. I can do that here in the Philippines because $1 US is worth 42 of their dollars. And on what little bit of money I get from the VA disability because of my PTSD, my back, which was destroyed by the body armor, tinnitus in my ears from all the loud noises, gunshots, all that.
What was that? I'm not sure I heard you. What?
Oh, anyway, what I wanted you to hear was that I can actually focus on writing full time here, and I can live like an upper middle class American because I'm taking advantage of the currency conversion, the economics of scale. Well, when I was in Iraq, there was a night towards the end of the deployment where we were rolling across the Arabian desert. I was driving. I was usually the machine gunner, but we trade off places every now and then. And my 2 battle buddies were asleep. We were out of the combat zone. We were in Kurdistan, up in the north, where there was a much more relative degree of safety. It was 2 a.m. I was looking at the stars glistening over the sand, and I made myself a promise. And I said to myself, if I'm fortunate enough to make it home, I'm going to focus more on making a life and less on making a living. No matter what I got to do that. And that for me is pursuing my passions, and my passion is writing. So I've come to a third world country to pursue my passion because I can afford to do it. And also because it allowed me to, what worked for me with the PTSD and getting off the crack the VA was giving me with all these different names on the sides of the bottle and getting off the alcohol again. It was basically getting away from the noise, getting away from the triggers, getting away from things that made me angry. In America, and God bless them, other people in my life wanted other things for me. They wanted me, I mentioned earlier, I've been a stockbroker for 8 years. And guess what? I made a lot of money when I did that. When I left, I was making $10,000 US a month. But it wasn't me. I hated it. I didn't want to go to work in the mornings. Okay, I think yesterday I made $8 selling books. But I'm out of bed at 4 a.m. here to write my books because I love it. It is me. And I'd rather, like Rocky says in Rocky 6, I'd rather do something I love badly than do bad by not doing something I love. We can't please other people. And when you're trying to, plus you're struggling with PTSD, and then you've thrown addiction into the picture, it's a mess waiting to happen. And I had a plan, and that was a wake-up call. I had the plan to exit this world prematurely, and so I took those drastic measures. I came here. I avoid people, places, and things that I learned to call before slippery slopes. There are other, they call us foreigners here in the Philippines, and there are other Americans here, and most of them are vets. Most of my American friends here in the Philippines are Vietnam vets who couldn't fit back into society when they got back, and they came here. I've met people that have been here for 30 years and haven't been back to the States. But I've found that for me to keep my sanity, I've got to stay away from them, even though they're wonderful people, because the topic always comes up of what happened to us in the war, how we were treated when we got back. And yes, my generation of veterans were treated much better than the Vietnam veterans who made it back. I've got a dear friend here in the Philippines. I'd love to be around him every day, but I've got to limit my time around him because, he starts his day with a bottle of booze. He gets through the middle of his day with a bottle of booze, and he ends his day with a bottle of booze. And for me, I found that dumping booze and dumping drugs on my PTSD is like pouring gasoline on a fire. And this is addressed in the book. The book does go towards mostly those living with people who have to live with people who have PTSD, but I address the veterans, and I make it clear through my own experiences, if you have PTSD and you think diving into the bottom of a bottle is where you're going to find the answer, I found that that's the wrong answer.
And
so I I can't do it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm gonna interrupt there, and Kevin, you and I discussed